Okay, question number 2 today on episode number 2 of the Q&A. 3 people actually asked me this off the back of the first episode when we talked about HIIT and stuff. So I thought, why not? Let's give the people what they want. So basically along the lines of, can you give me some examples of what good HIIT sessions are? And yeah, I can. Okay. Most people are asking for the good ones. You also asked what I preferred to do, so I'll go through my favourite things. We'll go through some little protocols that everyone can do with pretty much any scenario, whether that's the gym or outside, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll look at some really great things, but if you've not got the right bits of kit, there's definite limitations of them, unless you're quite experienced and disciplined and you understand your body quite well. But let's go into it. So based off last episode, just in case people are watching this and they didn't watch the other one, the main thing with HIIT is we're trying to avoid getting too far into survival mode too soon, / we don't really want to go diving into that very much at all. If you're in a sport that requires a strong lactic energy system, then yeah, we can start peaking that lactic energy system. But even then, I'd build your aerobic system and creatine phosphate system as high as possible, and then only peak that lactic system maybe for 4-6 weeks at a time, and I'd try and put that towards a big competition or whatever. But regardless of that, what we're after is, can we produce big power outputs, recover aerobically, and then get a very high amount of aerobic work done in a condensed amount of time, which obviously for most people that would be a fantastic training modality for them to do. Time saving, very efficient. If we can get power, so that strength times speed type element going as well, it's one of the healthiest things we could do. So yeah, my personal favourites for stuff like that are things like hill sprints. You just charge up a hill, come back down. So the most common one I do with that, I will run up a hill. I get quite a lot of my clients and athletes to do this as well because it's just so simple. Although at the moment, with it being wet and dark, it becomes a bit more challenging. But in the summer, great. Anyway, charge up a hill. Doesn't need to be super steep. As a general rule of thumb, the shallower the hill, the longer you run. But I like sort of a moderate hill going for roughly 7 to 8 seconds. Thing is with that, the faster you are, the shorter you need to run, usually. That makes sense? Because it's a bit like if you put a Ferrari and a Toyota Aygo next to each other on a drag race, and they both finish a drag race, but the Ferrari will have gone through a lot more fuel just because it will have powered it. That makes sense? So if you're naturally quite fast, you could probably come down towards 5 to 7 seconds. If you're a bit slower naturally, but you've got a proper engine, you might want to push it towards 8 to 10 seconds. But you charge up there, walk back down. Once you get back to the beginning, set a timer for 3 minutes. Once the 3 minutes is up, go again. Do between 3 to 6, maybe more. The thing that I really like to tie in all HIIT stuff to is heart rate. That's when it can really work quite well. So we'll come into that in a minute. My other favourites, apart from hills, are things like boxing. Same thing, you can just hammer it, have a bit of a breather, hammer it, have a bit of a breather. That's actually alactic aerobic, just in completely general. You explode, then you rest, explode, rest. So even if you do a 3-minute round, it's got the inbuilt rest in there to an extent. And then kettlebell work works great. Things like swings, you know, if you do 10 swings every minute on the minute, you're looking at about 15 seconds worth of work, but it's rhythmical work, and then 45 seconds rest and then repeat. It's even better if you can have slightly different protocol on that, but I won't go into that on this because it's a bit more complicated. But you can maximize power output and maximize recovery even better, so you can work on this even better. Not that the every minute on the minute isn't good, it's just slightly different. As with anything, there's plenty of different tools that could be used. In terms of the heart rate stuff, you could in theory do HIIT in any way you want. Good rule of thumb, 180 minus your age is a very good estimate of what your maximum aerobic function is. I.e., if your heart rate, so for me it's 152, if my heart rate gets to 152, I'm working as hard as I can with just my aerobic system. If it goes above 152, I'm starting to use that lactic acid energy system. That makes sense? Obviously, if it jumps up to 165 and then 20 seconds later it's down to 152, that's not an issue whatsoever. If I'm at 160 for 2 minutes, I am creeping into that lactic system. It's not necessarily horrendous, I'm not saying that. It's not until it got up to more like 180, 170 that I'd be feeling it a lot more, but it is in there. The other side of that is 160 minus your age. That's your lower end. That's, to me, if you stay mostly within 180 and 160 minus your age, i.e., let's take that hill sprint example. If I charge up a hill and my heart rate is around about 152, it might go a bit higher to begin with, but by the time I've walked back down and rested, it should be at 160 minus my age or less, my heart rate that is. If I can carry on sticking within that range, especially this lower one, as in, am I actually recovering in between, then that's absolutely fine. That means that you're working in the range that works for you. The other factor though, because there's a lot of different types of HIIT, I'm talking about quite a specific version here, but when we're talking about this now, you want to emphasize performance over fatigue. It's not about trying to get tired, it's about trying to perform as good as possible. So again, with the hill sprint analogy or example, I want you to run up that hill. If it feels like you're starting to run out of steam, let's say you've done 5 or you're on your 5th and it feels like you're running out of steam, and you look at your heart rate and it's creeping up, it's taking, it was going down to 120 and now it's going down to 140 in between your reps. You're on the cusp now of, I'm not saying you can't do more, I'm saying, do you actually benefit from doing more? Something to consider. Is it better to just say, right, I've done a great job there, and I'll come back tomorrow and do something else in the gym, or I'll do some more conditioning, whatever, go to training. That makes sense? So they're the really key things. If you can stick within the heart rate zones and you emphasize performance over fatigue, so it's that powerful action rather than am I getting tired? That's the problem. It's any protocol that's focused on just getting you tired is shit. I've got a watt bike here, you can just see the handle. So you can do great stuff on here because you do tests to work out your actual maximum power outputs, and the power outputs you can sustain for set amounts of time and blah, 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 which means that your recoveries and your working intervals can all be at the exact point they're supposed to be. So that's great. Not everyone has access to stuff like this, which is why kettlebells, boxing, hills, that kind of thing with a heart rate monitor just works so well. But I mean, you could just, if you're into football, you can whack your heart rate monitor on and do a couple of, like suicides, everyone does suicides. Do whatever, a bit of a sprint, rest up, bit of a sprint, rest up. If you combine that with just some steady state running or cycling or whatever, pretty cool, pretty cool. This isn't the be all end all of HIIT. You can do quite a few different versions of it. But for your general population overall, if we get a big power output and a nice aerobic recovery, the benefits for your physique, health and performance are unrivaled. It's fantastic. It's one of the best things you could do. It's just about getting it right. So, I hope that helps. A few of you guys were interested in that. If there's any other questions or things you want to cover on that, please let me know. I hope that all helped. And with the deadlift question, I hope that helped quite a few people. Sam, if you need to get in touch, or anyone else for that matter, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.